Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday evening space show program. This is, of course, West Coast time. I'm your host, David Livingston. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. Our favorite guy who likes to get our energy going, Bob Zimmerman, is our guest tonight. You see him there on the Zoom thing, and we'll get to Bob in just a quick second. I do want to tell you what's coming up. Hotel Mars tomorrow features Doug Messier talking about various launch rates, reusable rockets, and on a global basis, and that's with John Batchelor. Dr. Antonio Del Popolo is confirmed this time to come on Friday. He's an Italian astrophysicist. He is in Italy. I believe he's in Rome. And his new book is Extraterrestrial Life. We are not alone, and he wants to screen share his slides and his chart, which I assume are his evidence, because I have not yet had a chance to see his actual book. And Dr. Kathari is with us on Sunday regarding his presentations he made in India, where he recently spent the holidays, and also his thoughts on the essential cargo to the moon type of activity. Ethan Siegel, many of you know him, he's been a guest several times. Physicist, he's on next Tuesday. Sarah Scholes, a journalist, is Friday. Mark Whittington returns, and Greg Autry comes back on February 3rd. And Paul Jaffe with his new company, along with the CEO of the company, the Overview Energy Company, is with us Friday, February 6th. And Scott Solomon, I think he's with Baylor, is with us on what we have to do to have human reproduction and topics like that in space and microgravity. But Zimmerman is with us tonight. He's an award-winning science journalist and historian. He has 6 books and hundreds of articles. He has an incredibly popular website, Behind the Black, which has this really cool section called the Evening Interlude. So,
Evening pause, David.
evening pause, I always get that wrong. So it's not necessarily music, or it can be anything, but it's a really interesting pause, and people send him ideas for it. So it comes from all 4 corners or 5 corners or whatever of the world, but it's really a cool thing, and I hope you continue that on Behind the Black. But Bob, welcome. He has a op-ed that just got published where he doesn't think much of NASA and their quest for safety with Artemis 2, or for that matter, anything to do with Artemis. Bob, for those that did not read your op-ed yet, and by the way, it's linked on our blog and it's also on Behind the Black, introduce us to your thoughts on this.
It's interesting, David. This particular op-ed was less, well, this op-ed went over the dangers and I think mistakes NASA is making leading up to this Artemis 2 mission. Why I think the mission is a very dangerous one. It could very well work out just fine, but that doesn't excuse bad engineering or management. My op-ed was to review all that, but actually the op-ed was more about to condemn the press coverage of this mission. What happened over the last weekend is they rolled SLS Orion out to the launch pad in preparation for the wet dress rehearsal. And so every news outlet in the world decided to write about that. And they were writing about how wonderful this mission is going to be and how great it is in really almost fawning manner. None of the articles, none, mentioned the actual engineering questions involved. And this includes the space outlets like space.com, Space News, GeekWire, NASAspaceflight.com. You'd expect them to cover the bases, cover everything in describing the mission, but they all were very fawning about how wonderful this mission is going to be and how it's a great leap forward. And even worse, how NASA has done such great work covering all the safety issues, testing everything multiple times to make sure nothing is not been covered. All the dots and all the T's have been dotted and all the I's have been crossed to distort a cliche. And that's, to me, was appalling. It was like reading the state-run press of both the Soviet Union and China. And this is now not criticizing. This is not specifically at the moment criticizing NASA. It's criticizing journalism, because if you're going to cover this story, cover it right. Now, I don't expect every one of these news sources to have done that, but the fact is, talking about the actual engineering questions related to this mission makes for a better journalism story. From a journalist position, my position, how can you not talk about the danger of this mission? When if it bleeds, it leads, the old cliche. Well, why is none of the journalism doing this? It really surprises me, and it's almost like really they're in the pocket of the government and NASA, and that's disgraceful. So let's get back. That was one of the main points of the op-ed. The second point of the op-ed is to recognize the overall context of this Artemis II mission. It carries dangers. This doesn't mean it won't succeed, but it carries real dangers we should be aware of and recognize before it launches. I talk about the life support system. The life support system on the Orion capsule has never flown before. Now, and one of these articles compared this mission to Apollo 8. And how they did all the same kind of testing. But in the Apollo program, before they even thought about going to the moon, they ran a 10-day mission, Apollo 7, in Earth orbit, specifically to test the life support, the service module, the engines, the entire operation of the Apollo capsule and the service module for 10 days, the length it would take to go to and from the moon. They did that in Earth orbit. Wally Schirra, who was the commander, complained quite a bit how boring the mission was to him, because it was only going around the Earth. It wasn't doing anything really special, but NASA felt the need to do that. Well, on Artemis, they're not doing that with this life support system. What they're going to do is they're going to launch this capsule, and for the first few hours, they're going to keep it in Earth orbit to check out everything in the capsule. All right, now I give them credit. They're not going to go off to the moon before they've made sure that the life support system is working. But to be honest, they're then going to be gone for 9 days with no way to get back with a life support system that's never been thoroughly tested. That's not good management engineering when you do this kind of difficult work, rocket science. And of course, the second issue has to do with the heat shield for Orion. They flew the 22 mission to test the heat shield and everything, the other components of the capsule, sans the life support. They didn't need it there. There were no people on board, so why test it? It wasn't ready. But this was all to test these systems. When the capsule was recovered in the ocean, the heat shield had serious chunks broken off, and it was damaged in ways that no engineer at NASA had predicted. And that's not my opinion. I've read that in an Inspector General report about this heat shield, as well as NASA's own investigations about this. They recognize if something went wrong, they didn't understand. They spent 2 years trying to figure it out. They think, that's an important word, they think they have a solution. They think it has to do with the joints in the sections of the shield, of the heat shield. It's larger than they used to use with this technology, and they thought the way the atmosphere was interacting with it. Now, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not being precisely accurate in how I'm describing this, but I'm generalizing the idea. The way the atmosphere interfered with the heat shield, it caused gas to get in between and underneath and pull chunks off. They analyzed this to death. Did they change the design? No. They're going on this Artemis II mission with the exact same heat shield design. All they have done is decided, you know what, if we change the trajectory, the flight path coming back, we think we can reduce the stress on the heat shield. But this is not good engineering, because this is modeling. And in the end, you really don't know if this theory is going to work until you actually do it in real life. And you might get fooled, as they were on the first mission. And they're going to do that test with people on board. So this mission is flying with serious technical engineering questions that never should be allowed to fly. And I will repeat, as I've said many, many times over the years, if SpaceX tried to launch a Dragon capsule with these kind of questions involved, NASA would say no. But they wouldn't have to say no, because SpaceX would never launch a Dragon capsule with these kind of questions involved. I also want to point out that the SLS rocket has only flown once successfully. It was a total success. I give them that credit, but it's only one flight. If we go back in time to when SpaceX was getting ready to launch Dragon capsules manned to ISS, NASA demanded that SpaceX launch it at least 7 times with the Block 5 rocket that they wanted to use. 7 times. They wanted to launch it 7 times. SpaceX said, sure, it's a good idea. SpaceX also knew it wouldn't delay things very much, because even then they were launching enough to do it quick enough that wouldn't delay their actual manned missions. But they demanded that of SpaceX. But they're not demanding it of SLS because it's their own rocket. And they're only going to launch people on it after the second launch. Going back to Apollo once again, the Apollo 8 mission, which I've written a book on, the first real book on it in detail, interviewed everybody involved. They were taking great risks going to the moon there, and they were doing somewhat similar to this in risk. There's some comparison there, I agree. But the Saturn V rocket had been launched twice before this mission, so at least 2 launches. And they had problems on them, but they were able to pin down what the problems were, and they said they fixed those problems. And then they were taking a chance flying the 3rd time without having tested their fixes. So there is some similarity there. But in this time and date, and considering the situation, I think it's a real mistake what NASA is doing. Once again, they're doing it. So if we're going to report about this, let's talk about what the issues are and what the dangers are. And that's my point right now. We should be talking about it. Let NASA live with this. I fear something will go wrong. I pray nothing will.
So, Bob, a couple of points. First of all, listeners, I'm having massive allergy problems, so you see me wiping my nose. I'm not crying over what Bob is talking about.
David, they're not looking at you, they're looking at me.
But I just want you to know I'm having massive allergy issues. Are you making bets on the poly market or anything as to
Oh, no, I don't play that game. I just pray that everything works out. I will say that if it does work out, all that will mean is the bad management and culture at NASA will continue. I should point out too that this is the exact same culture that caused the Challenger accident and the Columbia accident. They are putting schedule above engineering. They have go fever. We got to fly. We got to get it done. We don't want to delay, and that's a mistake.
Why do you think?
In my previous op-ed for PJ, where I was begging Trump and Eisenhower to take the crew off, I outlined that the schedule would not be severely impacted by doing this as an unmanned mission. It would almost certainly not have us be beaten to China by the moon in this particular race. Not that that matters, but it almost certainly wouldn't matter in that context. And I said, take them off, fly this unmanned, make sure everything's okay. But they're not going to do that. So we'll have to pray.
Why do you think they are making policy and doing things in this sense? Are they convinced that they're following all appropriate safety considerations? Can you get in their heads and tell us?
I wouldn't do that, but I would say everything I've seen is that the management and Trump, it's his fault here as much, wants that manned lunar landing before his term is out. And so he's applying pressure. And so the management at NASA is trying to give him that, and they're not standing up to him in this case, and they should. They're not standing up to him, and so they pressured their engineers. Can you come up with show us a way we can do this on our schedule? And the engineers have done some testing, and they've done testing that is somewhat reassuring. I will say that one of the things they did do is they did a worst case scenario. What if the heat shield fails completely? Will the capsule itself, its hull, be able to resist the heat? And according to those tests, it would. So that's a very reassuring thing, without question. I agree with that. But nonetheless, they basically decided, they did, the famous line from the Challenger accident was, the engineers at Morton Thiokol were saying those O-rings were going to fail in cold weather. And the management at NASA said, you've got to take your engineering hat off and put your management hat on and make a decision based on management. And that was basically put schedule above engineering, and they did that, and they're doing that as far as I can tell here. Now, I repeat, they've done some good engineering to try to reassure themselves of this, but when you add the life support issue to this, this is not the way you should be doing this first manned mission. It's not ready yet. Simple as that.
I think Marshall wants to say something, and Marshall, you need to keep your microphone muted when you're not talking, but go ahead with Bob, please.
One of my questions on the heat shield is, didn't they have an alternate method, like using Falcon Heavy to launch cut down example of the heat shield and actually test it several times with Falcon Heavy? And that would have kind of solved the problem there, wouldn't it?
Well, you're actually right. In terms of Falcon Heavy, maybe they could have used it to put an Orion capsule on, but there's a limited number of Orion capsules. There's several issues here. One, when they discovered this problem, they recognized that to replace the heat with a new heat shield was going to take several years. NASA stalled for 2 years, dithered about this issue, so the time was lost. That was one. Second, they did make a decision on the next mission to use a different design heat shield. So the next mission is going to have a different design heat shield, I should point out. They're going to put crew on it, having never tested it before. So we back to the same issue. Yes, that's an interesting point, Marshall. I hadn't thought about this, but it's true. If NASA had been smart, because, all right, let's put together this alternative heat shield, or let's take an Orion capsule with this heat shield, put it on a Falcon Heavy, get it into a high orbit, and duplicate the return to Earth. This is what was done, by the way, with the Apollo capsule and the Saturn V. They actually duplicated the speeds returning from the moon with an Apollo capsule in exactly that manner. So they could have done it they probably could have done it with a Falcon Heavy. I mean, they're better engineers than me who would run the numbers, but I suspect so. But NASA didn't do that. And so this is, once again, it's a culture here at NASA that is not very nimble on its toes. And this gets back, there were great comments from NASA astronauts when they were getting ready to fly the first Dragon, talking about their impression of SpaceX. And they seemed so impressed by SpaceX's nimbleness and ability to shift focus and move from one point to another, and in a way that shocked them, the NASA astronauts. I would tell you that the way SpaceX functions is the way most American companies in the private sector have to function if they're going to compete successfully. It's not an unusual thing. It actually isn't that unusual a thing. But NASA doesn't function that way. And for that, and they have, so that we're in this situation. I wrote about this almost a decade and a half ago. The entire SLS Artemis program to get back to the moon is filled with inadequate testing. They don't have the hardware, so they can't fly a lot of missions. SLS is too cumbersome and slow, so they can't. If they decide to do more unmanned tests, they can't fly it multiple times. They don't have enough rockets. Part of this is that this program is not funded like Apollo was. That's true. It's also the fact that NASA doesn't spend the money as effectively as it was during the Apollo era. So the bottom line is it's a very test poor program. Let's go back to Apollo. They did the Apollo 7 mission testing in Earth orbit. They did Apollo 8 for a lot of complicated reasons to go around the moon. And in that case, they were testing their software to get to and from the moon, the systems getting into orbit and out of the lunar orbit. They were doing a lot of tests. They were taking a risk, but there were reasons why. They then did an Earth orbit mission with the lunar module to test the lunar module in Earth orbit. They then did a mission to the moon with the lunar module, but not landing, just to test it in lunar orbit and the docking and rendezvous in lunar orbit. That's all before they did the Apollo 11 mission. Now, we're not doing any of those here. We're going to do this one mission, which is not duplicating the eventual landing profile. And then we're going to do the landing profile with Starship the first time. As far as I can tell, I mean, SpaceX is almost certainly going to want to fly it manned in some other manner, maybe in Earth orbit. And I know that NASA is demanding them to do an unmanned demo mission to the moon. That's true. But nonetheless, I don't see the testing in the same manner. They're going to do this mission, and then they're going to land on the moon. And they're going to be doing it with Starship and Orion for the first time in that case. It's, you know, because Orion won't be on any Starship test flights. So this is going to be a combination they've never done before. It's a very concerning situation overall. In many ways, I don't know how to put this without sounding crass, but in many ways, entirely successful Artemis 2 mission will be counterproductive in the long run, because it will continue to allow NASA to pull wool over its eyes, and the public to have its eyes covered, because they won't recognize the seriousness of the situation.
Joe, you have a comment?
Yeah. Do we know why they're running this? This mission is going to have a free return profile going to the moon, I believe, so that if they can't fire the engines, the capsule still comes back.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering why, since they've already tested the capsule and they've already tested firing the engines in space and all that sort of thing, why are they not running this mission to NRHO or, you know, the Halo orbit that they're actually going to rendezvous with the Starship in on the next mission, and just not rendezvous with anything, just like, okay, we get here and then we push the button to go home?
It's being launched in such a way that you're right. It's free return, so you don't have to fire the engines at all. They will probably do mid-course corrections. I think they are, but you're right. But that's getting back to the point that just made. They're hardware poor, so they can only do so many things.
Well, what I'm wondering is there an energy problem? Like, does the
one issue I was about
capsule not have the?
They can't even test docking on this mission. Orion on this mission has no docking port. They haven't yet installed the docking port. Lockheed Martin has had almost 20 years. It got its contract to build this in, I think, 2006.
Well, there's nothing.
It might have been 2005. It might have been 2008. But that's the point is, it's in that period of time. That's almost 2 decades ago. It's gotten over this period of time almost $25 billion over that period of time. At least NASA spent that much. Lockheed might not have gotten that much, but NASA has definitely spent close to $25 billion over that period of time. Lockheed's built about 6 capsules, and they have not yet completed they have not yet delivered the docking mechanism. And I've read one report where they're demanding an extra $2.8 billion to build it. So overall, this is a badly managed, poorly run program that is equipment poor and not well tested and not well organized. And that's partly Congress's fault, because Congress, this is the Senate launch system. This rocket was created by Congress with no mission. And everything we're seeing here is NASA trying to scrape together a mission for a rocket that is not powerful enough for the needs, going to a place that isn't really ideal for landing on the moon. And so the whole program is a mess. In fact, David, when Obama canceled, you might not remember this, David, but it was on your show, and it was on Bachelor's show as well. I said this. When Obama canceled the Constellation program at that moment, I said, this is going to be a mess. And I said it was going to be a mess because they have canceled the NASA program. We're going to see Congress cobble together its own program, which it did. And nothing good is going to come out of that. The one positive that has happened in this craziness is the development of private space, which NASA helped happen, and Obama helped happen, his administration at least, maybe inadvertently, or at least he didn't know some people in his administration were making it happen. But private enterprise has finally come to the fore. So you're asking good questions. These are the kind of questions maybe should have been asked about a decade ago. It's like, Joe, you know, think about this. When NASA was trying to put together the Apollo mission, very early in the program, they had major meetings. George Low was involved in this and others to work out the framework for getting men into the moon. Would they do Earth docking? Would they do lunar docking? You know, all the components. And they made the decisions early on and then laid out how the Apollo program would be run with those goals and plans in mind. That is not what's going on here. And so it's overall a mess, and it's continued to be a mess. And hopefully no one will die on this mission, but sadly the mess will continue if that happens. It would be a great tragedy if there was a failure here, but if it did, it would close down SLS and Orion, I think, for good. And that would, I think, allow the shift to finally get to private space, which is the real space program right now.
Any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in if that's all right. So Bob, one of the things that technology has done for us over the years is given us the ability to do very sophisticated simulations. And with these simulations, I think that it's possible to take bigger steps each time you do a flight. Like you can do a flight, you can compare the simulation results to your flight, you can say, are my simulations good? And then because you have these accurate simulations, you can actually predict that a lot of things are going to work out. And the next flight you do doesn't have to be, very close to the previous one. You can take a larger step. And by doing simulations, you can probably reduce the number of flights you need to have a successful program by probably a factor of 2 or more, depending how risk averse you are. Have you factored that into your reasoning? I mean, you're comparing it to Apollo, but you're forgetting that Apollo didn't have these sophisticated simulations like we do today.
I mean, Phil, your point is well taken, and I absolutely agree there is value in that, and the simulations allow for greater sophistication, as SpaceX proves very clearly. And they push things amazingly because they have this capability and able to do things that no one dreamed possible before. And if anyone fantasized it, they thought they were idiots for even suggesting such a thing. Catching your first stage on chopsticks, that's ridiculous. But the bottom line, and I'll use SpaceX once again, the bottom line always is test your hardware. I have very good engineers who are in the space program who love to comment on my website. They're much better than I am in analyzing this. And several have pointed out that in the end, modeling is you can't depend on modeling in the end for this. You got to fly the thing and see if your modeling is right. Now, I grant you, the modeling today is much better and it's going to work well. But the modeling didn't predict what happened to the Orion heat shield. Did not. They were completely shocked by that. And so if you're looking now, they're going to fly that same heat shield in a manner that they haven't flown it before. This is one engineer pointed this out. They have not flown it in the trajectory they're going to try. They're modeling that they think that's going to work. Actually, I'm somewhat confident that the modeling they've got is going to work and it'll come back safe. I agree with you in that. But that's not how you should be running this program. I'm sorry, this is just not correct. You shouldn't be taking those, when you do an unmanned test and it shows problems, you don't fiddle with things to get around the problem. You fix the problem. And they didn't do that. They're going with the same exact heat shield. And that's a mistake. If they're going to go with a new heat shield, what should have happened right away is NASA should have decided, all right, the next Orion mission will be unmanned. We're going to go with the new heat shield and test that. Instead, they're going with the old heat shield, untested, and risk losing lives. And then on the next flight, they're going to use the new heat shield with people on board. And so they're going to do the same thing twice. And it's just not how you should do things. It's just bad management. So yes, your point is well taken, and we can do greater things, but this is just not how you do things. It's just bad management on NASA's part.
Yeah, when you find a problem with something, and if you just redesign it, you're opening up a whole can of worms. Like a redesign can have all kinds of new problems you didn't anticipate. It actually shows good discipline to say, we think we can work the problem. We've understood this. We've got the model matching the hardware, and just by changing the flight profile, we can guarantee it's going to work. If they start changing the design, they have a bunch of unknowns in there. And it could just be good discipline that they're not changing the design until they've had enough time to really, really thoroughly figure out the new design is going to work.
I pray you're right. Yeah. I do think overall, if your program is forced into that kind of thinking, your program or your project has problems. SpaceX, when it finds it has, and I use SpaceX because they're the most successful right now, but I could use Rocket Lab in this as well. If they find a problem, they aggressively move to fix it. And yes, they're going to have to fly additional flights with new unknowns, but their goal is to fix the problem so it doesn't come up ever again. And the result of that is they can reuse first stages. What is it? They had 600 landings now of the first stage. Several stages have now beaten most of the shuttles in reuse because they become reliable by doing it that way. So I just think the approach is a mistake. Even though this is all true, the approach is a mistake. It's the wrong way to look at this, and it's especially the wrong way to look at it when you've got humans on board.
Let me jump in, because Phil, if you were right, then I don't think the NASA statements around this would be what they are, because their statements are it's going to take a long time to fix this, and we don't have that time. So we're going to change the trajectory and do this. But then for the next flight, where we have more time, we're going to have a brand new heat shield that solves this problem, and then we'll fly with the new heat shield. So if their modeling was correct, and if they didn't need to come up with an entirely new design, then it would appear to me that they wouldn't be hurrying up an entirely new design and flying it for the first time with people on it on a later flight. They would just continue with perfecting their existing heat shield. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I am punching holes in your comment because of the way NASA is talking about it. I mean, they're the ones that put this information out. Bob's not making it up. I have read it in multiple things. We'll get around the problems this time by changing the trajectory. It's going to take a real long time to get the new heat shield designed. We know we need a new heat shield. We'll fly that in the next mission, and we'll fly that with the next crew. So that doesn't sound to me like the best way to resolve the problem is to tweak the existing heat shield.
Yeah, I want to point out, though, that Phil, that they're actually doing what you said is not a good idea. You said, you introduce a new design, you bring in unknowns, but they are bringing in a new design eventually.
Yeah, they are.
And the thing is, and I'm not against that, by the way. They needed to rethink that heat shield because it's a problem. But then they needed to test it properly beforehand. That's what I say. That all the modeling in the world does not replace the real world in the end. It just does not.
So
it means you can maybe take greater leaps, as you said, Phil, but in the end, you gotta cut metal and actually test it in the real world, because every single time engineers say, well, that surprised us. That wasn't exactly what we expected. And that's okay. That's the real world. That's what engineers, that's just rocket science. It's good if you learn how, but you got to do it. And NASA has not taken the right approach. I want to be clear here. I'm not actually criticizing the engineers in this. I'm criticizing NASA's management and the politicians behind this. They're playing the game. And of course, if this mission is a disaster and people die, every one of those politicians will look for scapegoats among NASA management and the engineers. They will say, we knew it all the time. And they're full of it. And it's really a tragedy.
So if NASA thought tweaking the heat shield was the proper fix, then why are they developing an entirely new heat shield?
Well,
so
David,
wait a minute, Bob. Hold on. Bob, hold on a minute. Hold on. This room right now, our Zoom room, is top heavy as hell with really great aerospace engineers. We got Dr. Cathari, we got Phil, we got Dallas, we got Joe, and Marshall's the software engineer, but he's a good engineer. Why are you guys all so silent on this? I know every single one of you has paid attention to this. So why should this be between me, a non-engineer who just reads the messages and thinks there's something BS going on here, and Phil and Bob, who also is not an engineer?
I would love to hear some thoughts about the engineering.
We got AJ, Dallas. John is not really an engineer, but he's close to it. He's more physics and science. But Joe and Marshall, sound off, guys. Don't just sit here like bumps on the log. You want to say
I
something?
certainly
stuck in
am
it
not
for
100% right
a
because I'm
moment
not
to
an
think of something
engineer.
to
I
say.
admit that.
Dallas, tell us.
Well, I've read Bob's essay, op-ed. I've read the stuff from NASA. I was surprised that we're going to fly the same heat shield. I just recently read about the new trajectory coming in. If I agree with somebody, why should I say anything? The only thing that has come up that I would comment on is the reason they don't go into NRHO is it would add another 6.5 days to the mission. Almost
That's the
double
life
it.
support system. That
Well,
brings
it's
us to
supposed
the
to be
life
good for
support.
21 days,
Yeah.
but they would go from a 10-day mission to a 17-day mission.
Yeah. And they have a life support system they've never used before.
Exactly. But they will spend 24 hours in Earth orbit before they go.
Yes, I know that. That's
24
not
hours.
that's not a 10-day mission. You
No.
know? It's
But anyway,
yeah.
I've got nothing to argue against with Bob.
I'm disappointed.
I'm sorry.
I'm so used to having everyone want to rip me apart. It's all right. I don't mind.
But yeah, I wouldn't run this program the way they're running it, and I wouldn't have the architecture they have. So
Would you fly on it?
on Orion and SLS, no,
You would not.
no,
Would you-
because it would cost me $5 billion.
No, I mean,
that's a
if
separate
they
issue. That's a
invited you to
different
fly
issue.
on it and there was
No.
no cost,
No,
they even paid your life insurance premium.
no.
Well,
No, I wouldn't
the
go.
cost is a big part of the problem here. The
I wouldn't
cost
go.
the cost is constraining the engineering in a very serious way at this program, because those rockets are $1 billion a piece, or
More than that. Much
yeah,
more.
maybe
than that.
more. But the point is, one of the reasons SpaceX can do what they do is because they make manufacturing their equipment relatively inexpensive.
Right.
Starships and even super heavies that have 33 Raptors in them are way less expensive than anything NASA does, right? And they build for series manufacturing, and they're willing to eat the cost of high cost units at the beginning of the curve, but they know they're going to get to low cost units pretty quickly, right? That's never going to happen with SLS, right? They're never going to make enough SLS things. The only thing that was supposed to be inexpensive is the fact that we have all these shuttle engines that we could use. But by the time they actually Rockwell or whoever it was made those things, refurb the engines, they were more expensive than building Raptor 3s.
Right.
Including the entire development program to build Raptor 3s.
They spent a lot of money to make them disposable, expendable. And I
don't understand how you spend money to make a reusable engine expendable.
I worked on the SSME in my early years.
Yeah, like if you're going to throw it away, like what is it you actually need to do to make the engine expendable? Now, they did have to manufacture new ones because I think by Artemis 4, they run out of, heritage shuttle engines, right? And they've already had one of the engines they had to swap out because they had a problem with the power head and stuff like that. So, okay, you have to recreate an assembly line for something you haven't done in 25 years. That is always expensive, right? There's just
I want to insert a point here that Congress specifically, and the big argument for using shuttle parts and the shuttle side boosters, solid rocket boosters, was it was going to save money and speed things up. And of course, that was a bogus argument from day one, if anyone wanted to be honest about it. But then once again, this gets back to the main point of my op-ed yesterday, which is we don't have anyone questioning this kind of stuff like they should. The ones that do question it are on the periphery and not paid much attention to, and I'm one of them.
Oh, really?
I'm not the only
Congress
one.
should have been questioning what they were.
Say again. I'm sorry, Joe. Start again. Say again.
Really, Congress should have been questioning what NASA was doing. And they have staffers, and people talk to those staffers, and they could have come in and said, hey, what are you guys doing? This sounds cracked.
Well, you got to remember, they were dealing here politicians. The politicians wanted SLS. And there were a lot of people pushing hard for the reuse of the shuttle in the space community, pushing hard for reusing.
And also, this program is so old that reusable rockets didn't exist when it started, including Falcon 9.
I know AJ wants to
Yeah.
talk, but I think we should be
Okay.
watching what Congress is doing rather than necessarily watching what NASA is doing.
It's
a
this
double-edged-
is something I report, David, a lot.
Yeah, well, I
This is
am
as
cynical.
much a fault of Congress, if not more a fault of Congress, because the people at NASA are employed by the president and the people in Congress, and they have to obey orders. And the orders here came from Congress, not even from the president, came first from Congress. They came up with SLS out of the blue when Obama, out of the blue, canceled Constellation, which was created out of the blue by Bush. And
So the real
all those
problem-
programs made very little long-term sense. But all of them were politically pushed by Congress and the president.
Hey, AJ wants to get in
Yeah.
on this.
Okay. Bob, okay, so you have come up with the criticism of these ideas and what the plans and etc., but you haven't offered a solution as to what it should have been or what it should be. And the problem here, of course,
you want me
is
to answer that?
No, let me finish. Let me
Okay,
finish
I'm sorry.
first. Okay, let me finish first. The SLS using something to actually do the testing of Orion or something like that would have to be, let's say, if it was SLS or something. Obviously, we just discussed that it will be horribly expensive, $2 billion a pop, etc. But your solution could have been, or offer of solution could have been something like using Falcon Heavy or something like that to test Orion. Although there is a problem, which is that the Falcon Heavy can put the Orion in LEO, but not necessarily in velocity that would be required for testing coming back from the moon. So how do we solve that problem?
All right. Well, you must have come in late, AJ. Someone else had raised the question of using Falcon Heavy to do those Apollo type lunar return missions. But I don't want to get into that because I don't think that's a solution. I don't think fiddling with the SLS Orion Artemis program that NASA's put together is solving anything. The last time I was on this show, and I've said this in several essays recently, including at PJ, the real space program right now in the United States is SpaceX's. And that's a program, it's a private program, but it is a program with a long-term goal, rationally thought out, building its equipment for that long-term goal in terms of settling space, not just simply putting a flag on the moon. And that's the space program of the United States right now. I think it's very sad it's only one company at the moment. I know Rocket Lab and Peter Beck wants to do his own thing, and that's good. And I know Jeff Bezos has been promising it for decades, and maybe someday the turtle will cross the finish line. But he has the same idea. I right now don't care the slightest about SLS and the Artemis program that NASA's putting together. And I'll give you I've said this in print before. From a historian's perspective, I can place myself in the future and how historians are going to look at things right now. And I can tell you, they're going to look at this SLS program as trivial, a footnote, because it won't accomplish anything really significant for the people that'll be settling in space. They're going to be looking at what actually made it possible to create the colonies in space of humans. And guess what? It won't be this mission. It won't be SLS. It won't be Orion. It won't be Artemis. It's going to be things that people like SpaceX and Musk do, and Rocket Lab, and maybe Jeff Bezos. So this is a very trivial mission as far as I'm concerned. I know it's very important now to everybody, but I'm looking at I always take a much longer view. I look at it from a historian's perspective, and this is not historic in any way, shape, or form. First of all, we've done it before. We're doing somewhat the same thing, not as well. So we're not accomplishing anything new. And the Artemis program as designed is merely plant a flag, put the footprints there, have a photo op, whoopee-doo, we beat the Chinese. That's not accomplishing anything. So I find it very trivial. So I don't think that's a solution. Anything with Artemis is not a solution. Anything with Artemis related to SLS Orion and what NASA has built, I think is not a solution. The solution is to look elsewhere. And as I've written on Behind the Block multiple times in essays since December, the real focus of NASA and the Trump administration right now should be, how can we foster the most robust American private industry in low Earth orbit and beyond now? That's why the space stations are important. That's why orbital tugs are important. That's why rendezvous servicing is important. And that's why SpaceX is important. Everything we can do to have a robust space industry in low Earth orbit, because that industry will sweep the Chinese off like a tidal wave eventually, just as we settled the West. We didn't have a space program. The government laid out the rules, the legal requirements for settling the place, but let people do it and the private citizens do it. And they did it. And they did it in multiple ways, competitively and prosperously. And that's what we need to do in space. That's what we need to do now. That's my alternative. I'm not interested in planting a flag on the moon. It's not going to accomplish anything down the road. I'm interested in building a real industry, a real spacefaring America. And I should point out that we're right now on the cusp of possibly doing that. And it's not just SpaceX involved, though they're in the lead. So I hope that answers your question, AG. That's where I'm coming from. I don't look at SLS. I look at the overall.
No, it did not answer the question, because the question I'm asking is about your op-ed. I mean, I'm constraining it to your op-ed. And what you were saying is you were criticizing that this thing has not been tested.
My point in the op-ed, to be very specific, was twofold. One, we must recognize that this Artemis 2 mission flying manned is dangerous, and we must recognize what the dangers are. And this is the second point. And this is something that the journalist community should be making clear. And my main point in this particular op-ed today had actually less to do with NASA's program and more to do with the failure of our modern journalist community to cover this story properly. That's what my op-ed was about. Previous op-eds begging to take people off that mission or to try to save lives. Do the test. The previous op-ed I did with PJ was very clear. Please take the people off it, fly it unmanned. You'll be able to test the life support. You'll be able to test maneuvering. You'll be able to test a lot of things. And then you won't risk lives. And then you put the same crew on the next mission and do an unmanned mission a manned mission around the moon. And I pointed out that framework would not delay the overall Artemis program so significantly that it would allow China to beat us to the moon. So that would make Trump happy. That's what I said then. But in this particular op-ed, I was merely pointing out that this mission is dangerous, and journalists should be talking about that so the public is aware. Now, solutions, I'm not an engineer, but I pointed out where I think we should go from a historical and cultural and overall political perspective.
Yeah, my point is twofold. One is what Phil Swan said about, the ability of the computations, etc., to not require that many actual flights to prove something. So I agree with that. And the other thing, of course, was that what I said is that it really is. I mean, you could say, and I agree with most of your points about Artemis. Okay, I agree that an SLS obviously is nonsensical idea, but there are and I disagree with your insistence or your hopefulness about Starship. I'm not so sure if it's going to work in time. At this point in time, I think our options are more for SpaceX, another SpaceX thing, Falcon Heavy, and possibly also New Glenn. Those kinds of things are more in line to give us answers and to be able to do things than relying on Starship. And SLS obviously has a problem of cost. My problem really in here, I again agree with you that we need to think about building things on moon infrastructure development, lot of infrastructure there, etc., which cannot be done by SLS. You may say that can be done by Starship. The Starship is not there. We need to start building things in next 2-3 years, and that can be done by Falcon
I
Heavy.
want to interrupt, but then I also want to hear what Phil has to say. But I want to interrupt to point out that my point is not specifics towards building one thing or another, and it's not to have the country build it. I want private enterprise and individuals to come up with ideas, and that's just not SpaceX. I'm not just talking SpaceX. I'm talking about the whole American industry of infrastructure
Sure, I agree.
competing to do things. That includes SpaceX, that includes Blue Origin, that
Yeah.
includes Rocket Lab, that includes Relativity, it includes Stoke Space, it even includes Astra, if they can get their act together. Anybody to come along, the competition and the innovation from many people will produce what we want. I'd like to hear, Phil, what your question was.
Yeah, so what I was going to say was I agreed with you on the idea that this is a dangerous mission. And I think that's kind of inherent when you're building a rocket where you have to make every decision very aggressively in terms of weight and safety margins, and you're supporting a crew on the mission, so everything has to work. There's a lot of risk in that. I don't know if I agree that NASA's not managing the risk well. I imagine they're doing the best they can, but this is a new thing. Doing it a new way with the new engineers. They have to get their feet wet on this whole challenge. What I'm not sure I agree with you on is the idea that there's no point to it. Like we already did it. We went with Apollo. There's a little bit of truth in that, but I don't think the private industry is just going to go and do this on their own. I think unless we lead, like as a country, as a national space agency, unless we lead this and take these big risks and kind of prove that it can be done and there is a way to do it. And until we've done that, we won't have an agency that can even vet whether a private commercial enterprise is on track or not. And we won't be able to sort of say to those guys, hey, look, we did this. You should be able to do it too. We'll give you some guidance. Be creative, but like we understand some of the problem here. We know how to make sure that you don't make any dumb mistakes because we've done it before. We've got the experience to oversee your efforts. I think that's a very important part of this process we have in America. Like we start off with the national agency doing it, taking the big risks, putting a lot of money and science behind it, and then we try to migrate it to the private industries.
Phil, your point's good. I don't disagree with it in many ways. Let me use my historian's perspective. Let's go back to the Louisiana Purchase in Thomas Jefferson. He had this territory. He wanted to help encourage the Americans to explore it. He sent out Lewis and Clark to survey it and get an idea of what was there. And what they published laid the groundwork for allowing people to follow and settle the West. And so there's precedent that is correct in this. Government has a place. I'm not disputing that. In my 2017 policy paper, Capital and Space, about this subject, I start off saying government has a place in this. It has national prestige needs. There are a lot of reasons why government should be in this. If I was NASA's administrator or President Trump, neither of which will ever happen, what I would do with NASA here is I would lay out goals NASA wants achieved. And I would be willing to give contracts to companies that can achieve those goals, but let them decide how to do it, which is exactly what NASA is doing with the space station program right now. They are not demanding any designs or concepts. They're just saying we need to replace ISS. We want commercial space station industry to do it. And so we're going to issue contracts. We issued some developmental contracts to 3 of the 5 stations being developed right now, and they're using that to help do their work. But because NASA says it wants this done and is going to issue later contracts as a customer, there are 2 other companies building space stations that have not got a dime from NASA because they see real profit down the road regardless from NASA and others. And so that's the way I see the future should be laid out. NASA's done this a great deal with its lunar program outside of SLS and Orion. It has said it's going to need a base. It's going to need power. It's going to need roving capabilities. It's going to need vehicles. It's going to need habitats. And so it's asking private enterprise to develop, do research and development of those various things. And especially with the power considerations, there are a lot of companies that are actually developing that now with the idea of selling it not just to NASA. Communications, there are companies trying to build, putting together constellations to provide relay communications for the moon and GPS to the moon and this kind of thing. And they're all private enterprise doing it. NASA's not designing anything. All it did is lay out a goal in the areas where it's doing it the best, laying out the goal, requirements, basic requirements it needs to do magnificent things, and asking the private sector to come forward and find a way to do it. And let them do it and let them own it and let them be competitive with multiple ways. So that's how I see it. A program, oh, I hate that word, and listeners of your show know this. I don't want a program. I don't want a program because that indicates top-down control. I want a private industry, chaotic and competitive and free. And NASA can help that happen by providing the framework to encourage the industry. Similar to as Lewis and Clark did. And in the West, the other aspect the federal government did is it laid out the territorial laws. I reviewed it actually on Behind the Black this week. I just finished a great book called The Pioneers by David McCullough. And he was talking about the first settlements in the Ohio territory over north of the Ohio River, right after the end of the Revolutionary War. This is a bunch of New Englanders put together a plan to set up a colony in Marietta, Ohio, basically on the Ohio River. It would be the first colony in this territory. They had access to this territory the first time because the Revolutionary War was over and Britain had given it to the United States, and they had it now. But to get that going, the first thing this group of New Englanders did was send someone to Congress to lobby Congress to write up a law to allow the purchase of property by private citizens, set up the legal framework. And they did that, and that was done, and then the settlement began. And that became the precedent for the rest of the settlement of the West. The U.S. government set up the territorial laws that allowed everyone to live under, that made settlement prosperous and successful. And that's the kind of stuff the government should do. Setting goals like we want to have a lunar colony is also good, but you got it. How you do it is the important thing. So
yeah,
that's where
the
I'm
Artemis Accords might be the only lasting legacy of the Artemis program.
Well, I'm sorry, Joe, I missed you. I didn't know who was speaking. Say that again, please.
The actual Artemis Accords that they're getting all the 84 countries or something to sign.
Yes.
Those might actually be the only lasting legacy of this program.
You are, I think, 100% right. When Trump's first term, I wrote a few op-eds for the Federalist talking about how the Outer Space Treaty was a very big problem for settlement of space because it literally forbids us to establish on the moon American law. Any country can establish law. Of course, China will do it anyway. They'll establish their law. But if we follow the Outer Space Treaty, we can't establish legal law. So you can't own land. You can't own property. You can't have property rights. It's not allowed under the Outer Space Treaty. And I wrote op-eds saying we should it's time to get rid of the Outer Space Treaty or get out of it. Trump, I don't know if Trump, but I know some people in the administration read those because soon thereafter, the Trump administration introduced the Artemis Accords. And in initial announcement, it very clearly was framed as encouraging private enterprise. And I looked at it as a very clever political tool. You create these bilateral agreements between us and other nations. You eventually develop a large alliance of Western private enterprise, Western civilization nations who all want to have property rights in space. And that'll give you the political clout eventually to eliminate the limitations of the Outer Space Treaty. That's what I thought was going on in the first Trump administration. Biden administration changed that. They basically said the Artemis Accords are to reinforce the Outer Space Treaty. And I'm not sure now in Trump's second administration he's even interested in the subject. But the alliance exists, Joe. You're absolutely right.
Well, they keep
that
signing
alliance is of Western nations. All right, I'm sorry. You go ahead. Say what you
I think Portugal just joined the Artemis.
Yes, Portugal was the 60th nation to join.
Yeah.
There's actually one other nation, I think it's Latvia, who said they joined, but NASA hasn't recognized that, so they maybe haven't made up their mind yet. But I think basically almost the entire West, and most interestingly, almost the entire post-Soviet bloc has joined the Artemis Accords. The people who were oppressed by the Soviet Union, they all have joined, pretty much. Hungary, Poland, two of the three, Estonia and Lithuania. I could go down the list. They all have joined and I think they know where the bread is buttered, and they like the idea of private enterprise and free enterprise. You're right. I think the Artemis Accords might be the most important thing that comes out of this if our politicians use that alliance properly.
How about moving to another topic, unless Phil wants to stay with this one?
I was going to
raise his hand.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different topic, I guess, but what I was thinking was the the Artemis Accords, if they say you can't own property on the moon or Mars or in space in general, that actually does disincentivize expansionist leaders. And we have at least three. We've got Trump, who wants Greenland. We've got Putin, who wants Ukraine, and we've got Xi Jinping, who wants Taiwan. They're all expansionist. And if we don't provide an outlet for that by saying, hey, if you go to the moon and you meet certain requirements, you can claim a little bit of the moon for yourself, then we're just going to have those guys focusing on moving borders around on Earth, which is kind of a zero-sum game. Whereas if we get them going to the moon and Mars, that would probably help expand human civilization. Probably be a very good thing for humanity.
Just want to make clear, it's not the Artemis Accords that limits property rights. It's the Outer Space Treaty. Just to be clear on that. But I don't dispute you there. And in fact, 10 years ago, I wrote an op-ed saying we should set up a homesteading law, international homesteading law, to allow nations to claim territory under specific rules. I stated that. I said that. We should let that happen, because right now it's going to all be if you don't have a system of rules, what it'll be? It'll be force. It'll be force. That's what will happen. China will do it by force. We'll end up having to do it by force. And that's, of course, not the best thing. That's not the way you really want to do it. That's not the ideas of Western civilization. We should set up a set of rules internationally. And I cited then an example of Spain and Portugal in the New World. They were both exploring ahead of everybody else, and they were coming into conflict with each other. And so what did they do? They went to the Pope and they said, Pope, give us an agreement that we can both live with. And he did. He set up the line, that horizontal longitude line, and those two nations respected this rule, which is why Brazil speaks Portuguese and the western parts of South America speak Spanish. They respected that, and it worked. And so I said we should do exactly what you said. I said it 10 years ago, as I said on my website. You want to find out what people will say in 2 years? Read my stuff. But I think it's a very good idea, and I think it's a good approach in space as well. And I think Russia, who cares? They're not going to do anything anyway. But China, I think we could probably work something out along these lines. And it would encourage every nation in the world to do stuff. If there was the possibility, if they did things in a certain way, they could claim territory. I'm all for that. I really do. And of course, because I'm also very confident that if we did it that way, we'd wipe the rest of them out, and the United States would do better than everybody else. I'm very confident of that. But so what? I think setting up a set of rules that everyone follows that allows them profit and gain in a reasonable manner for everybody will benefit everybody. I mean, the outline I said is you set up if you set up a base, you can claim a certain amount of territory around it, but only a certain amount. So you don't land on the moon, plant a flag, and say I own the moon. No, you land, you set up a base, you have a certain area you control. So you have an incentive to get there first. So whoever gets the South Pole first could claim a certain part of it. Not all of it. You set up certain rules, It's like the Homestead Act was, what was it? It was 160 acres initially in the east. And out west, they raised it. I think I might have the numbers wrong in the east, but the west, it was 640 acres because the land was less fallow, less fertile. So, but they set up limits. So you couldn't claim a whole state. So yes, I agree with that. That would be the right approach. But this is once again the same mentality. The culturally approached. Don't approach it as a program where we plant a flag and we beat China. You look at it as how can the government serve the American people to prosper in space the best way.
I have a question about NRHO and Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords are really relying on NRHO to be part of the entire plan. Now, NRHO has been criticized by various people, and it may not be there, maybe not. But if that happens, would Artemis Accord also have to change for, let's say, lunar surface?
The Artemis Accords are are interestingly vague. They are set up as encourage private enterprise, proper use in space, cooperation among the nations that sign it, et cetera, et cetera. But the real thing they do isn't the specifics of the wordage. The real thing they're doing is creating an American alliance of nations who are exploring space together. And when you have an alliance, think of party politics. You have a group with clout that can influence how things are done. And so that's the goal of the Artemis Accords if used right. You can use it to shape the politics in space to encourage private enterprise and settlement for the benefit of all peoples. But that would mean, from my perspective, freedom and competition and private rights, private property rights. And I think that's, from the United States perspective, that's really our fundamentals. And it's there in the language of the bill, of the accords. But it's vague, partly because they did not want to outright say they're going to violate the Outer Space Treaty. But they're laying the groundwork to create an alliance that can force a change to the Outer Space Treaty. That's how I look at it. David, you wanted to change the subject, I think. We're an hour in, so I think it's probably a good time.
What other stories are you following as the year starts?
Well, besides, I want to, for a minute, leave space. This might bore everybody else because it's about planetary exploration, but it's about science. I follow what goes on at Mars very closely with all the planetary probes, but right now, sadly, we don't have many anywhere but at Mars at the moment. So I'm focusing on Mars a lot. And one of the main orbiters for Mars is Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. I had a piece on Behind the Black earlier this week, or late last week, about its state, because I troll through its archives to find cool images, post them all the time, and this allows me to get a better understanding of what they know about Mars. And in looking at the more recent cool images, I discovered that there's been a significant increase in anomalies, blank strips, colors dropping out in the color strip, strange things that I didn't understand. And I had noticed some of this about a month ago and mentioned it on Behind the Black, but now I decided, since the increase was so much, I better talk to someone. So I got in touch with Alfred McEwen, who was the former principal investigator of the high-resolution camera on Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. He's stepped down because it's time to retire. He's someone else equally good, Sean. Got his name, sorry, but someone else equally good is taking over. But he told me what the issue is. It's aging. It's getting old. And so they're losing certain channels, or they call them channels. They're essentially strips. And their channels, each channel has multiple filters, red, blue, green, etc. And they're losing several of those colors. And they're doing what they've been doing for several years, which they adjust the temperature of the camera to try to compensate for the problem. He says they raise the temperature of the camera, and been doing it incrementally for years because there's a risk they'll damage the camera. And it's been working, and they have to then recalibrate everything for the new temperature. And that's one of the reasons I'm seeing dropouts and color changes, because they're not calibrated yet. And he did what most people who work for the government or do government projects said, well, we need more money to be able to hire people to do the calibration. It's true, probably, but so he says he thinks that instrument will last hopefully as long as Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which he says he thinks could still last 10 more years, which is hopeful and possible, because technology, as you say, Phil, is much better than it was 50 years ago. They make satellites that can last a very long time. So he's hopeful for that, and he thinks they can keep that camera going. It is the best camera that looks at Mars right now. Its resolution is spectacular, and it really produces good data. It has demonstrated, with help from Mars Express, the European orbiter, but not as significantly, it has demonstrated without question Mars is not a desert, dry planet like the Sahara, which I see this press, the journalism again. I keep seeing this in the press today as if that's what it is. And that's not what it is. We now know it's more like Antarctica. It's got tons of ice. You go above 30 degrees latitude, north or south, and the ground is ice. There's near surface ice everywhere, glaciers, lots of ice. And so finding water is not going to be a problem on Mars. You'll have to process it, but finding water is not going to be a problem. That's what these orbiters have discovered, and that's been the main thing. And I really hope they don't lose Reconnaissance Orbiter, because it's helped. They're beginning to do research to find out, to scout the areas they hope to land. For example, in looking through the archive, I see images, potential landing site for rotorcraft. I've seen a bunch of these over the times, but this particular one recently I saw was in the Starship candidate landing zone. Now that struck that struck a nerve. I said, "Oh, is someone planning a mission there?" We know someone is planning a mission there. That's SpaceX, but is someone thinking of putting a helicopter on Starship for future scouting? And so I contacted the scientist, and he said, "No, this is something planetary scientists do in their spare time. We're beginning the preliminary work for a mission that might happen a decade from now." And I said, "Well," I told him, the timing is right. You should be talking to Starship right now, because you might be able to launch a mission in 2 years or 3 years." He doesn't have anybody on his team, in his group, that are from the Ingenuity. I said, "You should maybe talk to them as well. You really have an opportunity. The timing is right. You should really do this, because a helicopter of some kind on a Starship would be really spectacular in that first mission. And there really isn't any reason why something like that could not happen. We know how to do it now. Ingenuity's demonstrated it. And Starship will be flying there. I think by the 31 window, there will be Starships going to Mars at the very latest. I think I'm pretty confident of that. So why not take advantage of it? And there's scouting work by planetary scientists going on right now on that subject. So this is the kind of cool stuff I'm seeing on Mars. And I think I wanted to bring it up because we talk so much about Starship and space and land stuff. We don't talk enough about where we're going. And Mars is one of the main places. It is. There's a reason Elon Musk likes it, because it has potential to become a terraformed human settlement, much better than the moon, actually.
What is the latest on our wanting to go even with the private sector to Venus?
Very little on Venus. There was a NASA mission to go to Venus that got more or less canceled, and it got canceled during the Biden administration for budget reasons, and it still sits dead. The one private mission that does exist going to Venus is Rocket Lab. Peter Beck has put one together. He wants to do a mission to Venus, but he's put that on the back burner. And he said so. The reason he did that is basically he wants to focus on Neutron. He wants to get Neutron flying, and for good reason. He gets Neutron flying. He has the capability then of starting to do a lot of very cool stuff. So that's where we stand. As far as I know, it's the only private mission I'm aware of to Venus. I have to think. If I could take a break, I'm not going to do this, but I would do a search on Behind the Black for Venus private, and I'd see if there's anything else.
There were 2 government missions and then 1 private mission that was attempting to go.
Okay. Do you know what the specifics? Any names? I think the private mission.
One was Da Vinci, and I'm trying to see if I can remember the other 2.
The Da Vinci one was a government one, and that was
government
canceled.
mission, and that's on hold, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically dead. It's not gonna. The chief scientist was complaining that she's losing all the people, and I think it might get reborn, but it's going to have to be rebuilt. I'm not sure the second government one. I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Like I say, search Behind the Black. Someone wants to go online, search Behind the Black. They could tell us, because I'm sure I've covered it if it's been there. And I know of Peter Beck's plans, but he's put that on hold for this. Venus has problems. Venus would be a lot more difficult to terraform by many, many magnitudes, because you couldn't even land there and set up a base. You got to work from above, and that's way beyond our capabilities right now. Joe.
Actually, I thought I remembered this. The Indian Space Organization,
ISRO,
yeah, has a Venus orbiter with a probe planned for Venus.
Yes, you're right. Thank you. I forgot.
think they're going to
They
use
have that planned. Yes.
Yeah,
think
that is true.
their
Yeah.
large launch vehicle to launch that one.
Yeah. Well, they're developing their. They have their large, their LVM rocket, which they're developing for their Gangneon Man mission, and I think that's the one they want to use for that Venus mission. That's their plan. So they do have one. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, they have PSLV, GSLV, those two different kinds of
They have
rockets.
more. GS-Field LV has been morphed into the LVM, which is
Yeah,
larger and
LVM.
more powerful, and it's the one they use for the man. They're going to use for the man missions and for planetary missions. They have other plans as well. They've talked about, but these are the actual rockets that are active. The SSLV. This is the government rockets. The SSLV, which is designed for small satellites, which had a real good market share in 2019 when it was first introduced, and then COVID hit. They shut down, and everybody else grabbed the market, and they can't get it back. They have the PSLV, which they've used for several decades, but in the last two launches, the third stage failed, and they have really, branding wise, they have a problem with that. They have the GSLV, which they use for their geosynchronous launches, and that has some limitations. It's not as powerful as they need for interplanetary stuff. And so they developed the LVM, the LVM. I think that's the three initials. I hate the names. I wish they'd come up with names. But that is a bigger rocket, and it's going to be used for their manned interplanetary program. And it's mostly developed, and I think has actually, at least one version of it is at least launched once or twice. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's close to. If it hasn't launched already, it's almost certainly almost ready. That's their fleet of government rockets. They have two different startups, Skyroot and Agranel, that are very close to launching, and we'll see if they do. They're startups like you have in Europe, basically about the same level. None of have yet launched, but some are getting close. And their government is trying very hard to do the same thing NASA's done, to switch to the capitalism model. And it's doing the same thing that happened in the US a decade and a half ago. The government agency sees its turf threatened and is resisting and fighting. And that's the battle going on in India.
Looks like China's going to go to Venus this year.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
hadn't heard about that. If I have, I forgot completely about it. Really? Have you looked online, Phil? What's the deal?
I found it on Wikipedia. It's the Venus Volcano Imaging and Climate Explorer, and it's VOICE is their acronym.
Are
It
they
looks
going
like
to
they're going
launch
to
it
image
to
volcanoes.
well, that's Venus. Venus has millions of volcanoes, so that's very cool. I mean,
Yeah.
did they say when it's planned to launch and what rocket they're going to use?
Well, I don't think they mentioned those details, but it's this year, and it's going to arrive in 2027. Yeah, they didn't give a specific date. It still says proposed.
Then
It's an orbiter.
Yeah, I should point that now that rings a bell. There have been examples of scientists proposing a lot of Chinese projects, but they don't have funding. And so I don't know if that's actually, the Wikipedia might not be up to date. We'd have to find out if that's actually been funded, more research
true.
on that. I'd be curious. What's the name of the project again?
VOICE, Venus Volcano Imaging and Climate Explorer.
VOICE. That's interesting. English. Okay. That's worth. I'm going to check that out when I got time. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like, and then there's two more that are U.S. missions, but I don't know if those got canceled. Two landers apparently.
Those are are those NASA missions you're talking about?
They say it's with NASA. Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty much on hold. None of the NASA's Venus missions right now are happening. They got put, and this cancellation was not Trump. This was actually took place during the Biden administration, and it hasn't been recovered yet. And there's arguments for and against the missions, from the government. And there was Peter. I don't know if Wikipedia says anything about Peter Beck's project, but he has it in his mind. He's doing it. Someone else had their hand raised. I don't know who. Marshall, I thought you'd raise it. No, I don't know. Right now, the U.S. does not have a lot of planetary missions out there. I mean, we've got Europa heading to Europa. You've got OSIRIS-REx, or now OSIRIS-APEX. Why do they change the names? OSIRIS heading towards Apophis. You got Europe's got JUICE going to Jupiter to look at the moons. Parallel to Europa Clipper. You've got I just had one in my brain and I forgot. It's a European. Oh, Ramses. That's Ramses, European's mission that's not launched yet. It's being built. That's going to go to Apophis. There's at least 2 missions going to Apophis in 29 when it flies close to the Earth. And there are a bunch of other projects out there, but in terms of planetary exploration, we're really, US right now is not doing a lot. But I think that's going to change very shortly. I really do. I think we'll see a real burst of activity, especially if Starship begins to fly operationally. We'll see a lot of things start happening because there'll be opportunities to get up into space frequently and cheaply, and that will generate projects at NASA and elsewhere. It'll happen.
How do you see New Glenn impacting the planetary?
New Glenn has the potential to really change things. Jeff Bezos, his company, it really does. They've got a very good rocket. They really achieved a great thing on their second launch to land the first stage. I was thrilled. It was wonderful, and it just took too long. And their pace has been, the new CEO, David Limp, has done, I think, a really good job of trying to turn that culture around at the company, because they had a good culture back in 2016. And then Bezos hired this guy, Bob Smith, and he turned it into everything I've described about NASA in the last hour. He turned Blue Origin into that. And so the culture became very poisoned, I think, slow and tedious and hardware poor. And so it's unfortunate in that sense, but they've got the rocket launching. He's managed to speed up their pace. They've got a lunar lander, an unmanned one they hope to launch this year. Dates are unclear, I think, but that they're hoping to do it. And that's a test flight for their manned lunar lander. And that's a good thing. And now New Glenn, they've announced they have several. This was always in the plans from going back a decade ago, that once it started flying, they would upgrade it to larger versions, which would be comparable in some ways to Starship Super Heavy in capacity. And they've now announced plans to do that. And the hope with New Blue Origin is that Limp will get them moving to be comparable to SpaceX, because that's what we need. I want multiple companies. I don't want SpaceX to be the only one to do this. It's not good. I want multiple companies with multiple ideas. And unfortunately, Blue Origin has dropped the ball too much. For example, I periodically, when there's a new update from one of the space stations, I will repost my rankings of the 5 stations. And at the bottom of the rankings right now is Orbital Reef. That's the Blue Origin-led project with Sierra Space. And I basically right now say it's dead in the water, as far as I can tell. Sierra Space, as far as I can tell, has done all the work. And even then, they've kind of backed out recently. And their failure with Dream Chaser, in a lot of ways, with Tenacity, puts a damper on that company. And Blue Origin hasn't done a damn thing, as far as I can tell. And so that's unfortunate. Once again, the potential is there, David, and I pray we'll start to see some activity there. I actually, right now, have great hope for both Relativity and Stoke Space next year, as well as Rocket Lab's Neutron. If anything, those might spur Blue Origin to step up its game, and that's all good. Marshall?
Yeah. My question is, Elon Musk on a regular basis comes in and talks about eventually Starship being under $100 a kilogram to space.
Yep.
I've never heard Jeff Bezos or anybody from Blue Origin talk about an ultimate goal in cost of payload to space. And Rocket Lab, I haven't heard either. Have you heard anything along those lines from
I have not.
anybody? But
I have not.
Elon?
That doesn't mean they haven't said it. I might have missed it. I know that both with Jeff Beck, he's competitive. His goal is to lower the cost to be competitive, to get customers. That's his goal. And he actually charges more than others. He charges more than SpaceX on SpaceX's bandwagon and transporter missions. He charges more because he's providing a different kind of service. But his goal is to reduce the cost so he gets customers. And that should be the cost of Blue Origin. Under Limp, I think I think we're going to see that based on his approach. He's trying to rev that company up. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, so I did hear Dave Limp also make that we're going to reduce the cost by 2 orders of magnitude statement that Elon's been making for years. And I was kind of rolled my eyes at it because nobody's really reduced the cost by even 1 order of magnitude yet. And so anyway, I think somebody's frozen here. I just want to make sure it's not me. But yeah, so David Limp has made that statement in passing.
I want to ask a question here. You said has Dream Chaser actually been canceled? Is that what you're saying?
Bob had to drop out, and he's
plus
trying to
Bob.
come back in. So give him a minute to come back in.
Yeah.
I had heard that the attempt to launch.
I'm here again. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I suddenly dropped
Yeah.
out. I came back.
I had heard that the attempt to launch Dream Chaser this year has been put off to at least next year.
Oh, that's it. I had not heard that. I saw my stringer Jay. He sent me a link to an FCC license for Sierra Space to fly Dream Chaser this spring. But I said to him, that looks old, and it looks like it's the original FCC communications license for the ISS mission, and of course that's off. So we didn't post it. That's interesting, Joe. You've heard? Do you have any source for that?
I don't remember. I heard this like a month or two ago that they like all of a sudden it was like demanifested. It wasn't going to fly in any of the first few Blue Origin missions.
And you're talking about the mere orbital mission of Dream Chaser, not
the orbital mission. Yeah,
that's interesting. Actually, you got a point. I wouldn't be surprised if they had to delay it because of Blue Origin not having the facility to launch it. They're limited. They're slow operations.
They only have like. Did they say they're going to do 4 launches this year? I think.
Like I heard 6. I heard 6 was their goal, but it could be in that range. And that limits the number of things they can do. And they have the Amazon Leo contract. They have
a big backlog of military payloads.
And the military payloads as well, right? They're going to get priority for sure. So that wouldn't surprise me. I just haven't heard it. It doesn't surprise me at all.
I will look around and see if I can find where I heard that. But
email me. Emails on the website, or email David and pass it on to me. I'd like to know, post that if it's true.
Bob, what are you hearing on the nuclear front and nuclear?
Well, look, Isaacman is pushing for it hard. He signed a deal with the Energy Department that they're going to develop a nuclear power plant to deposit on the moon by 2030. And my first comment when I read that was, this is a government project that will certainly go over budget and behind schedule. I have no confidence in that at all. None at all, because it was actually not set up the way I've been talking. They didn't say we need a nuclear power plant set on the moon by 2030. Who can deliver the product for us? And there are companies right now, private companies, that are developing small nuclear power plants because there's demand from the various data centers that want to be built. They need the power. And so there is private companies. Now, they might be looking at those private companies, but the way they announced the project, it sounded like it was going to be a government designed and managed project. They would design it, and they'd ask companies to build to their design. And when government does that, I am always suspicious and skeptical of its achievement. Isaacman wants nuclear power on the moon, and you develop these kind of nuclear power capabilities. It means also you might have nuclear engines for rockets, which is a wonderful idea, and it's been back and forth for decades, and there was actually successful tests of it in the 60s. We could use it in space. It would really make going to other planets faster and more efficient if we had that capability. So I see movement, but unfortunately, I'm not enthused about how it's started.
Do you see movement? Do you see movement for terrestrial nuclear power plants finally?
Well, start again, David. I missed the beginning.
Do you see any movement in getting terrestrial nuclear power plants back into the grid?
There's a guy I know here in Tucson who's involved in that. He told me an interesting story. He says there are companies that are trying to build these, And these various data centers for AI that are being built by various companies like Google and others, they need power. And they've actually been looking into those companies to see if they can get small nuclear power plants installed as their power for their specific data centers. And the story he told me was he was at a meeting where he was trying to explain this to a group of people. And he said the word nuclear, and they went nuclear, and they would not even hear it. They wouldn't even talk about it. Now, does that mean it won't happen? I have no idea, but there is that emotional irrationality that still exists in a lot of people's minds about such things. And so where it's going to go, I don't know, but there is clearly a growing demand for that extra power because of the delusional love of AI right now in our society. So they're building a lot for it.
Why do you say delusional love?
Well, I personally think that AI might have uses, but right now it's a bubble. It's a lot of people screaming and loving about it and know nothing about it. And when you really look at it closely, in a lot of ways, it's garbage in, garbage out. And it's misused in a lot of places where it shouldn't be used at all. There are places where it's wonderful, but people are beginning to apply it in places it's inappropriate, and it'll actually detract from the final product. I mean, when I see journal and news outlets, once again, having them use AI to write their articles, I cringe because, first of all, I routinely find those articles are stupid and not very accurate. And secondly, it's not the way to do things in that particular field. That's not the way to get that done. It's not going to work well. It's going to detract from the overall product. AI can't think creatively, not really. It's going to only use the information it has. A human being will use the information it has, especially if they're knowledgeable, but they can apply a creative extra thing to change to analyze things better. And you can't get that from AI. You really can't. It can't think beyond the information it has. But there are places it can do great work. I know a lot of software people tell me it's magnificent for their work, and I believe them in that sense. So I think the delusional aspect is this desire to put it into everything.
I think it's actually hard to do worse than the main news organizations do in covering science and space topics.
Oh, you mean the AI might do a better job?
Yeah, it might be better. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the end, you're just you're trading green trash for red, as far as I'm concerned. What the real solution is, go to my website. Find out what the real news is. That's what I would say. And go to the specialists. I mean, not just me. Like if you want to learn about space, you go to the various space outlets. You're more likely to get better information. You don't go to CNN or ABC. They don't know. And the same thing in other fields as well. You go to the specialists. You want to know about politics, you go to good political sites and check them frequently and to find the ones that are accurate repeatedly. Those are the ones you go to.
NSF is getting very professional in their...
NSF, yeah. And
NSF, yeah,
NASA Spaceflight is an excellent site. Yes, I agree.
They're getting very professional in their both their launch coverage and also their coverage of other stuff.
I agree. They have a problem. They're a little bit captured by the establishment. There are a lot of their reporting, especially during the Biden administration. They were not skeptical at all about the regulatory burdens that the FAA was placing on SpaceX, and they should have been. And it was very clearly a political attack imposed by the Biden administration, forcing the FAA to slow walk SpaceX. It's very clear. And the proof of that is SpaceX moved very fast before the Biden administration, and it's moving very fast now. It doesn't have to wait 3 months for them to retype an investigation report. SpaceX submits the report, the FAA looks at it, says, okay, go, launch. It wasn't happening in the Biden administration. And NASA Spaceflight.com was defending the FAA's position that they were captured. And so that's the one area they're weak. But it's such a small area that it wouldn't take much for them to fix it. And they're not weak in that area very often. So it's not a big deal. I really respect them and use them a lot. Absolutely.
I want to say a couple of things about the nuclear side question that David asked, I guess. The SMRs that we are talking about for AI or whatever, AI, I do agree that it's kind of a bubble. But nevertheless, the SMR power requirement for that is almost 200 megawatt to 300 megawatt. The power requirement for the NASA's reactor that they are talking about is 100 kilowatt. It's much, much smaller, obviously. And the power requirement probably for a propulsive mechanism, the thermal propulsion type of a thing is of the order of 50 to 100 megawatt. Now, one possibility also is that if we can, and this is an idea, if we can use some kind of a nuclear, and I'm talking really about this. Another thing is the advanced reactors that they have been developing, which is the generation 4 reactors. There are 6 different types. And the one which is most attractive to me is thorium molten salt reactor. Any one of them can probably do a propulsive mechanism, and then that, except for the nozzle, the rest of it can be repurposed for on planet or wherever, in cislunar space or wherever, for energy. So that's kind of something that could have a dual purpose, is what I'm thinking of.
Guys, it's getting we just had another person drop off because of the hour, so let's sort of move toward a conclusion, if there is a conclusion to this discussion. Bob, have we missed something that you think we should know about?
I'm sure, without guarantee, without question, but I haven't the faintest idea what it might be, because if I knew, we wouldn't have missed it. So I can't really answer. I mean, you notice this particular show, we talked about SpaceX and Starship relatively little. And I'm not suggesting we talk about it now. We've been talking about NASA and its management issues and how to set up a future space program the way I think, a space industry, the way I think it should be done, and other options. And that's good. I get tired of talking only about SpaceX and Starship. There are other companies, we mentioned them. But, 15 years ago, when Obama canceled Constellation, and I said this was a mess, I also said we're beginning a transition, and that transition was going from the government Soviet-style model to the capitalism model. And the Soviet-style model is top-down space program. Government decides what's done and runs everything. And the capitalism model is where the government is merely a customer and buys products from others. And it can, of course, have a grand product requirements, but it's still just a customer, and the private sector provides the products. And that transition, I said, is going to take a while. I said this 15 years ago. I thought it'd take about a decade. And in a sense, that's true, but it really hasn't hit home yet. Because it's only SpaceX, we need multiple companies. This is why Blue Origin was such a disappointment so far, because they really should have been equal to SpaceX every step of the way, because every one of their projects, every one of Bezos's projects, Amazon Leo, New Glenn, were proposed at the same time that SpaceX proposed Falcon and Starlink. And Amazon's so far behind. Amazon and Blue Origin is so far behind. So they're a disappointment. But we need the competition. We have we have redundancy then. We have new ideas, and we'll have a future. That's really where I'm hoping this year we'll finally start to see that. Not only from New Glenn, but from Stoke Space, Relativity, Rocket Lab, the new rockets coming on, and competition from Europe. ISA Aerospace hopes to launch, what is it, tomorrow? Maybe today? I have to look. It was right in this month, the second attempt of the launch. A whole bunch in Europe, a whole bunch in India, Australia. Gilmore Space, they tried to launch last year, failed. They just raised another 145 million in American dollars in investment capital. So they're moving forward to be a rocket. So we are beginning to see the layout of competition.
We've got Ariane 6 going with Amazon's first contribution to satellites.
That's right. They're going to do their first.
Should be any day now, right? Or within.
It's like in the next day. Once again, I don't have my website up, but
so this is a reusable
any moment.
And Ariane 6 has got a reusable portion to it, right?
No, it does not.
So I'm
Ariane 6 is
confused on that.
totally expendable. It is why it is a failed product. When they first proposed this in 2015, that was just about the time SpaceX was developing landing capabilities. The heads of Arianespace poo-pooed reusability, said it's a waste of money. And they demanded that Ariane Group build Ariane 6 as a expendable rocket. And it is an entirely expendable rocket. And guess what? It's too expensive. Nobody in Europe really wants to use it. They have actually had a great deal of trouble getting customers. The only reason it's actually, I think, has survived is because the stockholders, with Bezos's influence, the stockholders at Amazon Leo did not want to sign up SpaceX to launch Leo. So they went to everybody else they could find, and that meant Amazon went to Ariane 6, Arianespace, and they went to Blue Origin, and they went to ULA. And they got sued, the board of directors, because their stockholders said, you're not doing proper due diligence to our value of our stock because you're not signing up SpaceX, which is cheaper and more reliable. And so almost immediately, they quickly signed a 3-launch deal with SpaceX to put 3 launches up so they could say, we're not avoiding SpaceX. We're doing it all. Your lawsuit's invalid. By the way, SpaceX very quickly did all 3 of those launches. They're done. And we're waiting for the others to go. So yes, Arianespace is not reusable. It's one of the reasons Germany, France, Spain, and Italy have all encouraged private startup rocket companies. They have given up on Arianespace. They are pushing for private enterprise and independent space because the government rocket they got is a dud. It'll launch for a few years filling out the Amazon Leo, but it has a limited life. They've had experts at managers at Arianespace give speeches saying the European Union and European Space Agency should pass laws requiring European companies to launch on Ariane 6. It's because they can't get customers. And the answer was, to heck with you, we'll start private companies to compete.
Anyone else have a comment for Bob or for the audience or for anyone else on the program with us? Before
I was wondering about Tory Bruno because he moved over to Blue Origin. I was wondering if you had any news on.
I had a vision of Phil. I'm sorry, I just had a vision of rats jumping the sinking ship when that happened.
So who's
I don't know if it's true.
Who's
I do
running
know
ULA
that
now? Who's over at ULA now? Who is taking over?
I haven't. They've named someone interim, and I have never heard.
Yeah,
of
I know the interim, but they haven't named a permanent.
They haven't named, as far as I know, they haven't named.
Phil, are you aware of who they're bringing in?
No,
I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe the guy from Ariane will want to come to America.
Oh yeah, they'll bring in Stefan Israel from Arianespace. That would really be a step forward. And I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. ULA, once again, ULA will not die instantly. It's got the biggest contract with Amazon Leo, so it's got a lot of launches down the road. Plus, it's got all those Starliner Boeing launches that it still has contracted for. We'll see those happen in the next week or so, won't we? But ULA's got launches down the road. They're not going to go away so quick. They have like I think 45 Amazon Leo launches in their contract still to do. It might be 44. But it's in that range. So they've got a lot of work.
And they do.
Once that's gone, they're not going to get a lot of business with their rocket.
Well, they still have Vulcan that they can.
But Vulcan at this moment is entirely expendable. And their plans to make it reusable, they haven't been acting very enthusiastic about doing that. They're smart technology. And the idea is a little kludgy. I always thought it was kludgy, where they're going to have the engines separate and they'll catch them as they come down and they'll rebuild a new first stage around the engines. I grant you the engine's the most expensive thing, but that sounds to me like an extremely complicated way to do a very simple thing. Now that we know it's a simple thing. But, we'll see how that plays out. Vulcan right now is expendable, which means in the long run, it cannot compete. Once Stoke Space and Neutron and with its rocket, Nova, and Rocket Lab's Neutron start flying, which are very reusable, ULA is going to have a lot of problems bringing customers on Vulcan, not without reusability.
What should we keep our eyes on for the coming weeks and months?
Everyone should go every day to Behind the Black. I'll plug my website. I mean, I report everything that's going on, and so I keep track. That's my solution to the thing. After they've listened to the space show, they should go to Behind the Black and find out some news.
Well,
what else can I say?
What project should we put our attention on to follow?
Well, you know, Starship is number one, of course.
Starship remains number one.
Neutron, I've mentioned them actually. Neutron relativity, the launches of these new rockets, all the new rockets. That's what I'm covering. That's what we should pay attention to, because we got to get to, before we can have a spacefaring society, we got to get into space. And to do that, we got to have multiple ways to do it. That's inexpensive. And SpaceX has led the way, but there are now many others following. And that's the future. That's what we got to watch. And that's what I'm watching. That's what I watch totally. And of course, in conjunction to that is the space stations, but they're reliant on launch capabilities. It's why I log every launch that occurs on Behind the Black, keep track of who's doing the most, because that's the future. That's will make everything else possible.
Have you seen any stories or any development other than conference talk on space rescue?
I'm not sure where the question is. Space rescue in what way? Are you referring back to like the Shenzhou damage with China?
Missions, astronauts, whatever might need rescuing in space. I'm seeing AIAA conferences. I'm seeing big panels on establishing a space rescue system and on and on. So that's why I said past conference talk.
I see. Well, what's always been done since day one of the first space station is that any crew that comes up in a capsule, they go down in that capsule, and that capsule is their lifeboat. And that's always been the way it's done as a rescue system. In terms of any other mission interplanetary, some of the solutions to that have been done by having, compatible docking systems. But right now, it's not cost effective to focus on that because there are no missions. When we start to have bases on the moon and multiple space stations, then maybe some of this will be a consideration. But as long as there's a lifeboat on every station for every person that's there, then you don't need a whole infrastructure, a rescue service. When I hear that, what I hear is someone lobbying for government money. That's what I hear, because you don't need that. Again, let's go back to space station and the NASA's history. NASA was going to build Freedom. Then it was going to build ISS. And in the early days, they were spending billions on a lifeboat that they would dock at ISS and keep there at all times. Utter waste of money, and they canceled it eventually. It was an utter waste of money because the truth is the capsule that goes up is the capsule that's the lifeboat, and you bring the people back in it, as the Chinese just did now, and to a certain extent, what was done with the Starliner situation. Starliner was questionable, so they sent another capsule up to bring them home. And that's the rescue system you use. You don't have a lifeboat sitting on the station continuously, and you surely don't need a whole rescue infrastructure. I'd rather call the company that owns the capsules and have them do the rescue, as NASA did with SpaceX when Starliner had a problem, than call some international body of bureaucrats who have worked up the perfect plan to do this. I'm skeptical. Sorry.
Speaking of Starliner, any news on that, or is that a dead issue?
It's not a dead issue, but I have not heard any. There's been utter silence since the last since Starliner came back about what Boeing's going to do. They have not said they're killing it. NASA still has it reserved for flights. They still have their flights with their 6 reserved flights with the Atlas V from ULA. But there's been no word on when the next mission will happen. Oh, the one word I've heard is it's likely going to be a cargo mission to ISS unmanned. And that way NASA gets to pay them some money to do it. But I think that negotiation is still ongoing. And I think that's why we haven't heard anything. My memory, I'm doing this from memory. If I looked at my website, I find the last news. And I do remember there was some piece about that cargo mission, but I don't remember all the specifics, whether it was actually a date set or whether they're still negotiating the deal. But that's probably what the next Starliner mission is going to be. It's unmanned. They'll test it again. Hopefully the valves, the engines, the thing will work. Boeing is a sad company right now. It's a tragedy what happened to that company. That's all I can say.
Too bad Dallas left us, but
What's that? Yeah, he left. He
too
was
bad
saying about
Dallas left us. But of course, he retired when Boeing was still up at the top of the pinnacle. But
Well, then I would love to. It's too bad we weren't talking about this when he was here. I'd love to hear some of his points.
next time, since he's getting our invitations, next time
Okay.
we'll remember to ask him about Boeing. Bob, thank you. Next quarter, I'll send you some times and dates. And
One last word.
Yeah.
Phil, because we discussed this specifically, I strongly recommend people, and this is a plug, but as I think you want to understand where I'm coming from on a lot of my things, you should really read my most recent my book Conscious Choice, because even though it's about the origins of slavery in Virginia, it applies directly to what we need to do in space when we set up our colonies, and it gives some of the where I'm coming from, and I think. The American colonies, the British colonies, gave us a great controlled experiment of what to do and what not to do. And I think humans are no different now than then. And so we can apply those lessons to the future to avoid the mistakes in Virginia that happened there. So that's my last word, Dave.
I will say, Phil, I read the book. So
Oh, yeah.
I have read it. I was surprised that it was actually very informative and a very good book. Almost everything in it was different from what I had gotten in school and in traditional everything. That doesn't make Bob right and schools wrong. I don't have the background to say that, but it is definitely worth a read. It is definitely perspectives that are not common, and they are definitely perspectives in history that you can relate to going forward with space development. So I would say to anybody, it is absolutely worth a read, and use your own due diligence and your own intelligence to make what you want of it. But it is a unique book. It does have specifics that we can apply to going forward with space. And I'd like our policy wonks to read it. Now, whether they will read it or have read it, I can't answer that. But I think Bob did a great job and a great service. So I would recommend it.
I want to point out, I didn't say it's right. I said this will give you my perspective on where I come from, and that's and then you can challenge it. That
You
would be
can do what you want with it, but it's worth the read, and it's worth considering what Bob has suggested in the book and talks about.
So what was the title of the book again? Because I just looked it up.
It's called Conscious Choice, and there's a subtitle which I myself can't remember. The Origins of Slavery in Virginia and Why It Matters for the Future of the Exploration of Space. Approximately, that's what the subtitle is. And it's about the origins of slavery. If you go to my website, Behind the Black, you'll see a box for Conscious Choice and links to Amazon for buying it. Or you can get it directly from me. I have copies, I'll sell them direct, but you can definitely get it from Amazon or any vendor. They have it. It's distributed.
I found it. Okay, thanks.
Sure. And that applies to everybody else,
Thank you, Bob, and Phil, and Marshall, and John, and the others have departed. So we shall depart too.
Till next time.
Until next time. So
thank you all. It's a really good format to do it this way. I like it.
Thanks, Bob. Dr. Popolo on Friday is with us, and on Sunday, AJ is with us. He still has jet lag from India, so I knew he was going to depart earlier. And if you guys have suggestions for others, do let me know. And as we like to say, keep looking up. And I didn't get a chance to thank our sponsors, one of which is still with us right now. Phil is with us with the Atlantis Project, but AIAA, Helix Space, National Space Society, Celestis, Astrox, that is AJ, Dr. Ben Roya, John Jossi couldn't be with us tonight, and Artless Entertainment. So thank you both for all of you for your support. and back again on Friday with another space show program. Everybody have a
Bye.
good week. Stay safe. Keep looking up and think space. Goodbye from Bob, John Hunt, who is very quiet tonight, Marshall Martin, Bill Swan, and myself with bad allergies. Good night, everybody.